There's a certain comfort in the mundane, an unspoken promise that life will follow a predictable rhythm. For Christine, life was a series of orchestrated steps between waking and sleeping. Each day a quiet echo of the one before, a cycle unbroken and serene. Her small, cozy bedroom was a sanctuary, a place where the world couldn't intrude, and where she could wrap herself in the familiar sense of self she had cultivated over the years. The walls were painted a calming shade of lavender, adorned with framed photographs of cherished memories and art that spoke to her soul. A large window let in the gentle morning light which danced across the room, illuminating her modest collection of books and the potted plants she tended with care. Christine awoke each morning to the soft chime of her alarm, its sound woven seamlessly into the fabric of her routine. She would rise, stretch, and take a moment to breathe in the tranquility of her surroundings, reassured by the unchanging nature of her life. Her reflection in the mirror greeted her with a familiar face, one that carried the comfort of recognition and an unspoken affirmation of her identity. Her days were filled with the tranquil pursuits she loved, gardening, reading, and the occasional visit to the local cafe, where she would sit quietly, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by. It was during one of these serene mornings, as she sat by her window with a steaming cup of herbal tea, that Christine first noticed the subtle shift in her world. She had glanced up from her book to find her gaze drawn inexplicably to a figure standing on the sidewalk outside her house. At first, it seemed to be just another passerby, someone whose presence would merge into the background of her day. But there was something about the figure that held her attention, a peculiar stillness that seemed at odds with the flow of life around it. Christine squinted, trying to make out the features of the stranger, but the distance and the early morning mist obscured them. She felt a slight chill run down her spine, an odd sensation she couldn't quite place. Shrugging it off as a trick of the light or her imagination, she returned to her book. Though her mind wandered back to the figure throughout the day, she dismissed the encounter as inconsequential. Yet, a whisper of unease lingered in the corners of her mind. As the days passed, the figure appeared again and again, each time at the same spot, each time with the same unsettling stillness. Christine found herself drawn to the window, her curiosity tinged with a growing sense of apprehension. She began to notice other oddities too, shadows that didn't quite match their sources, reflections that seemed to linger a fraction of a second too long. Her world, once so stable, had begun to feel slightly off-kilter, as though viewed through a funhouse mirror. It wasn't until one particularly cloudy afternoon that the true nature of her unease revealed itself. She had been sitting in her living room, the air thick with the promise of rain, when she glanced toward the hallway mirror, her breath caught in her throat. Staring back at her was a reflection that was both her own and not. The face was hers in shape and form, yet devoid of the nuances, those subtle expressions and the spark of recognition that made her uniquely Christine. It was as if someone had crafted a mask in her likeness, an eerie, faceless doppelganger staring out at her, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. A blank canvas where her identity should be. Christine recoiled, her heart racing as she backed away from the mirror. She blinked rapidly, hoping to dispel the illusion, but the faceless visage remained, an unsettling echo of herself. A cold sweat broke out across her skin as she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number of her best friend. Laura. The words tumbled out in a hurried stream, her voice barely above a whisper, as she described the unsettling phenomenon. Laura listened patiently, her calm voice a balm to Christine's frayed nerves. She reassured her that stress and exhaustion could play tricks on the mind, that sometimes the brain interpreted reflections differently when tired or anxious. Christine wanted to believe her friend's soothing words, to chalk it up to a momentary lapse in perception. Yet, deep down, she felt a gnawing certainty that this was more than mere illusion. In the following days, the faceless doppelganger haunted her reflections, appearing not only in mirrors but in windows and any reflective surface she came across. Each encounter left her more shaken, her sense of self unraveling with each blank gaze that met hers. She avoided mirrors, covered them with cloths, and tried to fill her days with distractions. Yet, the presence lingered, a shadow at the edge of her consciousness, a specter that seemed to seep into the very fabric of her being. Sleep became elusive, as Christine found herself plagued by dreams that bled into nightmares. In the dark recesses of her mind, she wandered through hallways lined with mirrors, each reflecting her faceless counterpart. She would reach out, trying to touch the glass, only to find herself pulled into the cold, featureless void. She would awaken drenched in sweat, her heart pounding with a fear that clung to her like a second skin. Desperate for answers, Christine sought out books on the supernatural, hoping to find some explanation for her haunting. She learned of legends and myths, stories of doppelgangers and shadow selves, figures that foretold doom and heralded loss. Each tale wove a tapestry of fear and mystery, a chilling echo of her own experiences. She read late into the night, her fingertips trailing over the pages as she tried to piece together the puzzle of her haunting. As she listened, she tried to piece together the puzzle of her haunting. One evening, the rain drumming a persistent rhythm against the windows, she stumbled across a passage that spoke of identity and the soul, of how the self could be fragmented and lost. The words resonated with her, striking a chord deep within her being. She realized with a jolt that her battle was not with an external force, but an internal one. A struggle to hold on to who she was in the face of an encroaching void. With renewed determination, Christine resolved to confront the faceless reflection, to reclaim her identity from the shadows that threatened to consume her. She stood before the largest mirror in her home, a grand, ornately framed piece that had once belonged to her grandmother, its gilded edges gleaming softly in the dim light. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself, meeting the blank visage with a gaze that was firm and unyielding. As she stared into the reflection, she spoke aloud, her voice a gentle yet firm assertion of self. She recounted memories, moments that defined her, painting the canvas of her life with words. She spoke of her love for the scent of rain-soaked earth, the way her heart lifted at the sound of birdsong, the comfort she found in the pages of a well-loved book. With each word she felt a flicker of recognition, a slow resurgence of the light that had once filled her eye. The transformation was gradual, a soft blurring of the boundaries between herself and the reflection. Features began to emerge. First the curve of a brow, then the gentle slope of a nose, the subtle arch of lips that seemed to come alive with each breath. The eyes, once voids, now mirrored her own, the depths filled with the warmth of her spirit. Christine watched, transfixed, as a faceless specter melted away, leaving in its place a reflection that was wholly and undeniably her. Tears of relief spilled down her cheeks as she reached out, fingertips brushing against the cool glass. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped her heart began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of wholeness and peace. The nightmare had lifted, and with it, the shadows that had threatened to steal her identity. As days turned to weeks, Christine returned to her routines, her life a tapestry of normalcy once more. The mornings were filled with the soft light of dawn, the comforting rituals of tea and quiet reflection. She no longer feared the mirrors, their surfaces now merely tools, not gateways to a faceless void. Yet, despite the return to calm, there remained a lingering awareness, a subtle reminder of the fragile nature of identity. She carried with her the knowledge that the self was not a static entity, but a mosaic of moments and memories, each piece a vital part of the whole. The faceless doppelganger had been a test, a mirror held up to her soul, challenging her to embrace her true self amidst the shadows. Christine understood now that the true horror lay not in the loss of features, but in the loss of self. And in reclaiming her identity, she had not merely survived the nightmare. She had emerged stronger, her spirit resilient and unyielding against the darkness. The reflection that greeted her each day was a testament to her journey, a reminder that even amidst the deepest shadows, the light of the self could never truly be extinguished. In the comforting embrace of Amelia's family home, nothing ever seemed out of place. The house was a quaint two-story structure that had stood the test of decades, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else. The walls were adorned with photographs capturing the simple joys of life. Christmases, birthdays, and vacations long past. The sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting intricate patterns on the hardwood floor. This was a sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. Amelia was a high school senior, a thoughtful girl with a penchant for daydreaming. Her days were marked by the gentle rhythm of schoolwork, piano lessons, and the occasional visit from her best friend Lily. Everything felt predictable, secure. That was until the day she encountered the girl in the mirror. It began in the most innocuous of ways. One evening, as the golden hues of twilight bathed her room, Amelia sat before her mirror, brushing her hair. She paused for a moment, captivated by the mirror's ability to perfectly mimic her every move. But then she noticed something peculiar. There was a delay, a fraction of a second where her reflection's eyes seemed to shift independently. She blinked hard, attributing it to fatigue or a trick of the light. A chill skittered down her spine, but she shrugged it off. Mirrors, after all, are just glass and reflections. Days passed, and Amelia returned to her routine, the peculiar incident nearly forgotten. But the mirror had other plans. At night, as she drifted into the realm of dreams, she felt a presence, a shadow lurking just beyond her consciousness. Her dreams were filled with unsettling images. A girl who looked just like her, standing in a room that mirrored her own, yet was not quite right. The colors were muted, the lighting cold and clinical, and the air was thick with an unnameable dread. The first true disturbance occurred on the night of the school dance. Amelia had been looking forward to it for weeks. She stood before her mirror in a flowing blue dress, her hair styled in soft curls. She felt like a princess, ready to step into a fairy tale. But as she admired herself, the hairbrush slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Her reflection did not drop its brush. Instead, it stood there, smiling with a twisted, knowing grin. Amelia's heart raced as she backed away, her pulse thundering in her ears. The reflection simply watched, its eyes glinting with something dark and ancient, something that went beyond the simple mimicry of reflections. She stumbled out of her room, shutting the door with a trembling hand. Her parents were downstairs, jovially discussing their plans for the weekend. She hesitated, wondering if she should tell them, but a part of her feared their disbelief almost as much as she feared what she had seen. The dance was a blur of lights and music, laughter and conversation swirling around her. But Amelia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the phantom reflection had followed her beyond the confines of the mirror. Her friends noticed her distraction, but she waved them off with a forced smile. She tried to lose herself in the moment, to drown out the unsettling memories with the rhythm of the dance. That night, back in the silence of her bedroom, the mirror loomed like a forbidden portal. She avoided looking at it, opting to change out of her dress with her back turned to the glass. As she slipped into her pajamas, she couldn't resist a quick glance. The reflection stood there, unchanged, unthreatening. Relief washed over her, tinged with doubt. Had she imagined the whole thing? But the disturbances did not end. Over the following days, the mirror seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Each time she passed by, the reflection seemed to linger just a moment too long, its eyes tracking her movements, with an intelligence that made her skin crawl. She became hyper-aware of mirrors, avoiding them whenever possible, especially at night. The escalation came subtly, insidiously. The dreams grew more vivid, more intrusive. The girl in the mirror began to speak, her voice a soft whisper that echoed in Amelia's mind even after she awoke. "Come with me," it beckoned. "See the world beyond." Amelia's grades began to slip, her concentration shattered by the constant intrusions of the reflection. She became withdrawn, her once bubbly nature replaced by a cautious silence only Lily noticed, her concern growing with each passing day. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," Lily remarked one afternoon as they sat under the sprawling oak tree in the school courtyard. "Is everything okay?" Amelia hesitated, torn between the desire to confide in her friend and the fear of sounding ridiculous. Ultimately, she shook her head. "I'm just stressed about exams," she lied. But that night, the girl in the mirror grew bolder. As Amelia lay in bed, the air grew heavy, oppressive. She felt a tugging sensation, as though something within her was being pulled toward the mirror. The whispering intensified, a cacophony of voices urging her to join them. She fought against it, teeth clenched, fingers digging into the bed sheets. And then she heard it, a soft, mocking laughter, echoing from the mirror. Summoning every ounce of courage, Amelia forced herself to look. The reflection was not alone. A shadowy figure stood beside it, its features indistinct yet terrifyingly familiar. It was her, and yet not her. Panicked, Amelia bolted upright, her heart pounding as she flicked on the bedside lamp. The sudden light banished the shadows, leaving only her own wide-eyed reflection staring back at her. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth of the room. The climax came the following evening. Amelia had resolved to confront the entity, to face whatever haunted her reflections. She waited until dusk, when the house was quiet and her parents were out for the evening. Armed with a resolve that only desperation can bring, she stood before the mirror, meeting her reflection's gaze head-on. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The reflection smiled, a slow, sinister curl of the lips. "To show you the truth," it replied, its voice an eerie echo of her own. "Let me in." Amelia shook her head, taking a step back. "No," she whispered. The reflection's smile widened, its eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "You can't avoid your destiny, Amelia." As she watched in horror, the reflection's hand reached out, not toward her, but toward the other side of the mirror. For a terrifying moment, reality seemed to warp and twist. She felt a pull, as if gravity itself was shifting, drawing her toward the glass. In that instant, Amelia understood that the reflection was not merely a trick of light and shadow. It was a gateway, a bridge between worlds, and it wanted her. With a cry, she turned away, refusing to be lured into whatever nightmare lay beyond the mirror. She fled the room, slamming the door behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she leaned against the wall, heart pounding in her chest. But even as the door closed, she could feel the lingering presence of the reflection, a cold, spectral touch that seeped into her bones. The lingering fear haunted Amelia long after that night. She avoided mirrors whenever possible, their reflective surfaces now fraught with danger. The dreams continued to be plagued by the girl in the mirror and her insidious whispers. Though the direct confrontation ceased, the sense of being watched never truly left her. It was as if a part of her had been marked by the entity, a silent promise that it would return. Amelia's life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but she was forever changed. The girl she had seen beyond the mirror had left an indelible mark on her soul, a constant reminder of the thin veil separating reality from the unknown. In the quiet moments when she was alone with her thoughts, she would sometimes catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of her eye, a fleeting shadow that vanished as soon as she turned to look. The reflection had not forgotten her, and deep down, she knew it never would. And so, Amelia lived each day with a careful awareness, a vigilance born of experience. The mirror remained a fixture in her room, an unspoken challenge that she would never fully conquer. But she held on to her resolve, determined to live her life despite the specter that lurked just beyond the glass. Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with the supernatural, but within the recesses of the mind. And Amelia, though scarred, was a warrior in her own right, navigating the delicate balance between fear and courage. I remember the day we moved into the apartment overlooking the beach, my fiancé and I. It was a quaint little place, nestled in a small town that seemed to straddle the line between the picturesque and the desolate. A place where the ocean's whispers seemed to coalesce with the whispered secrets of its few inhabitants. Our mornings were filled with a gentle crash of waves against the shore, a serene symphony that lulled us into a false sense of perpetual calm. We had been looking for somewhere to escape the hustle of city life, and this seemed like the perfect retreat, an idyllic bubble away from the world. Those early days were filled with a kind of blissful normalcy, the kind where our biggest concerns were whether to have dinner at home or visit the little seafood shack down the road. The air was salty and crisp, and we often took long walks along the beach, collecting shells or simply enjoying the quiet company of each other. There was an old mirror in the hallway of the apartment that the previous tenants had left. It was a grand, ornate piece with a golden frame that seemed to have known better days but still held a certain allure. We left it there, thinking it added character to the apartment's otherwise plain interior. The first disruption to our tranquility came on a rainy afternoon. I had been alone in the apartment, my fiancé having gone out to run some errands. As I sat by the window watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, I heard a distinct creaking noise. It was the kind that old houses make, the sound of wood settling, or at least that's what I told myself. But as I turned my head, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. The hallway mirror seemed to ripple, almost like the surface of a pond disturbed by a falling stone. I dismissed it, chalking it up to a trick of the light or my imagination, perhaps the result of staring at the gloomy weather too long. Yet, the thought lingered at the back of my mind, an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. When my fiancée returned, I mentioned it to her in passing, expecting her to laugh it off. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully, saying she had noticed something odd about that mirror too, but hadn't wanted to mention it for fear of sounding silly. We joked about the mirror being haunted and left it at that, though the laughter didn't entirely dispel an underlying disquiet. Over the following days, my unease grew into something more substantial. The rain had persisted, leaving the town shrouded in a perpetual grayness that matched my increasingly troubled mood. The mirror began to occupy a strange place in our lives, a fixture that was at once familiar and yet unsettling. Sometimes, when I glanced at it, I thought I saw something in my reflection that wasn't quite right. A shadow that seemed out of place, a flicker of movement that couldn't be accounted for. Yet, every time I looked directly, the mirror showed nothing but my own face staring back at me, expressionless and unchanged. My fiancée, too, seemed affected. She had become quieter, more introspective. At night, she would lie awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if chasing some elusive thought that slipped away as soon as she reached for it. We still took our walks along the beach, but the conversations that once flowed so easily between us now felt stilted, as though we were both preoccupied with something else. The weather didn't help. The rain continued to fall, lending a dreariness to everything it touched. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, the power went out. The room was plunged into darkness save for the weak glow of the streetlights casting shadows through the blinds. We found an old candle in the cupboard and lit it, the flickering flame offering a small island of light in a sea of shadows. It was then, in that fleeting illumination, that I saw her, the reflection in the mirror. She wore my fiancé's face, but her eyes were different, darker, as though they held an abyss behind them. She smiled, a slow, eerie smile that sent a shiver down my spine. I blinked, and she was gone. My fiancée sat beside me, her face serene and untroubled, a stark contrast to the image I had just witnessed. I didn't tell her what I saw. I couldn't bring myself to voice it, for fear of what it might mean, or worse, that it might somehow make it real. But from that moment on, I became obsessed. I watched the mirror whenever I could, hoping to either catch another glimpse or prove to myself that it had been a figment of my imagination. The situation escalated rapidly. My nights were filled with restless sleep, dreams haunted by that dark side reflection. I would wake, heart pounding, to find my fiancée sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware of the turmoil that raged within me. The mirror seemed to mock me, its polished surface revealing nothing but my own haunted visage during the day, while at night it became a portal to my fears. I began to dread being alone in the apartment. Each creak of the floorboards, each sigh of the wind through the cracks sent my heart racing. I avoided the hallway, reluctant to walk past the mirror unless absolutely necessary. Yet there were times I felt compelled to stand before it, as if drawn by some invisible force. I would stare into it, my eyes locking onto my own reflection, waiting for something to happen, for the facade to crack and reveal whatever lay beneath. My fiancée grew concerned for me, urging me to take it easy, to see a doctor perhaps. I could see the worry etched into her features, her eyes searching mine for answers I couldn't provide. The guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, to admit that the reflection in that mirror was affecting my grip on reality. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself once more in front of the mirror. The apartment was silent, the kind of silence that feels too thick, too oppressive. I could see my reflection clearly, the candlelight casting a warm glow that seemed at odds with a chill in my bones. I watched and waited, my heart thundering in my chest, and then she appeared again. This time, she stepped closer, her movements smooth and deliberate. Her lips parted, and though no sound came, I understood her intent. She pointed behind me, her finger an accusatory spear. I turned slowly, my eyes darting to the empty room and then back to the mirror. She was gone. But the imprint of that silent accusation lingered, an unsaid promise of something more to come. I retreated to the bedroom, seeking solace in the familiar warmth of my fiancée's presence. She stirred slightly as I slipped beneath the covers, mumbling something incoherent before settling back into sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, tracing the patterns of light and shadow, wondering what it all meant. The reflection in the mirror had become a specter, haunting my every waking thought. Days turned into weeks, and the sun finally broke through the relentless rain. The town was awash with color once more, the sea a brilliant blue that sparkled under the sun's rays, yet the pall over our apartment remained, an invisible cloud that refused to dissipate. My fiancé suggested we remove the mirror, perhaps put it in storage. I agreed, but despite our intentions, it stayed where it was, as though it had taken root in that hallway, entwined with the very fabric of our lives. The climax came on a night that seemed indistinguishable from any other. We had gone to bed early, exhausted from days of tension and sleepless nights. As I lay there, the darkness seemed to press in around me, denser than usual, as though something watched from the shadows. My eyes flicked to the open bedroom door, the hallway beyond shrouded in inky blackness. I tried to close my eyes, to shut out the oppressive feeling, but it was no use. I felt drawn, compelled to rise, to confront whatever lay beyond. I stood before the mirror, the dim light from the street outside casting just enough glow to illumine my reflection. My heart pounded in my chest, a drum beat that matched the rhythm of my rising fear. She was there again, closer than ever, her eyes locked onto mine. She reached out, her hand pressed against the inside of the glass, a mirror image of my own. And then she whispered, her voice an echo in the depths of my mind. It was a plea, a call for release, a promise of peace if only I would let her in. Something within me snapped. I reached out, my fingers meeting the cold surface of the mirror. As our hands aligned, a jolt ran through me, a sensation like an electric current that sent me stumbling back. The mirror shimmered briefly, and then she was gone, leaving only my own reflection behind. Hunted, hollow-eyed, and alone. The lingering fear remains, a constant companion. I have tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that it was all in my head, a product of stress or some sleep-deprived hallucination. I then probably am, yet, in the still moments, when the world is quiet and the shadows grow long, I can feel her presence, waiting just beyond the reflection. The mirror stands in the hallway, untouched, its surface a reminder of what I cannot explain, what I cannot escape. My fiancé and I have grown closer in the aftermath, finding strength in each other as we navigate the peculiar darkness that has seeped into our lives. But the dread lingers, a reflection haunting not just the mirror, but the recesses of my mind. I know she is there, waiting patiently for the day when I will look beyond the glass and meet her gaze once more. Until then, I live with the uneasy truth that some reflections cannot be escaped, only endured. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn of our family home. It was my 13th birthday, a day that unfolded like a well-worn routine, steeped in the comforting rituals of cake, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. My parents were bustling about, finalizing preparations for the small celebration, while my younger sister, Lily, chattered excitedly about the balloons and the pile of presents that waited on the dining room table. In the center of our living room stood an antique mirror, a family heirloom passed down through generations. It was ornate and stately, its glass slightly clouded with age. My mother had always been particular about its care, ensuring that the wood was polished and the glass spotless, though the latter was a losing battle against time's inexorable wear. Despite its grandeur, I had never paid it much heed. It was simply part of the home, a silent witness to our daily lives. After the cake had been cut and the candles blown out, I made my way to the living room where the mirror awaited. It was a childhood tradition to stand before it and make a wish, a ritual as old as the mirror itself. As I approached, I glanced over my shoulder, ensuring that no one was watching. The room was bathed in the warm glow of evening, casting a soft light across the mirror's surface. I stood before it, my reflection clear and familiar, yet somehow different. The mirror had always reflected more than just the physical. It captured emotions, moments, and the essence of our being. I took a deep breath and whispered my wish, watching as my breath fogged the glass momentarily before fading away. That night, as I lay in bed, the house settled into its nocturnal rhythm. The familiar creaks and groans of old wood lulled me into a sense of security. Yet, beneath the comforting blanket of darkness, a peculiar unease took root. I dismissed it as the remnants of excitement from the day's festivities and eventually drifted off into a restless sleep. In the days that followed, I began to notice subtle changes. At first, it was nothing more than a fleeting sensation, a feeling of being watched. It was as though the mirror had become more than a mere object. It was a presence, quietly observing from its place in the living room. I shrugged off the notion, attributing it to an overactive imagination fueled by the tender cusp of adolescence. However, the disturbances grew more pronounced. I would catch glimpses of movement in the mirror's depths, a shadow flickering at the edge of my vision, vanishing the moment I turned my gaze. My reflection seemed just a fraction of a second out of sync, a delay so slight it was almost imperceptible. Yet, I could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. I confided these sensations to Lily one afternoon as we sat in our treehouse, the summer breeze rustling the leaves around us. She listened intently, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and concern. To my surprise, she admitted to feeling something similar, a strange pull towards the mirror that she couldn't quite explain. Emboldened by her admission, we decided to investigate further. That evening, under the guise of playing, we positioned ourselves in the living room, watching the mirror with a keen attentiveness. The light from the setting sun cast a warm glow across the room, illuminating the mirror in a way that made its surface shimmer. As we sat there, an uncanny quiet settled over the house. The air felt charged, electric, as if waiting for something to happen. And then, it did. The reflection in the mirror began to distort, the edges warping as though seen through a heat haze. I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing the cool glass. And in that moment, the reflection snapped back to normalcy. But not before I saw something that sent a chill racing down my spine. My own eyes, staring back at me, but with an expression I had never worn. From that moment on, the mirror became a focal point of our lives, an unspoken presence that dominated the household. My parents, oblivious to the changes, continued their routines, their laughter and chatter masking the growing tension that Lily and I felt. We spoke of it only in whispers, a secret shared in the quiet corners of our home. Days turned into weeks, and the disturbances escalated. Objects near the mirror would shift inexplicably, as though nudged by an unseen hand. The air around it felt colder, the temperature dropping several degrees in its immediate vicinity. I found myself inexplicably drawn to it, spending hours staring into its depths, searching for something I couldn't name. It was during one of these vigils that I noticed the reflection behaving independently. My reflection moved with me, but there were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when it acted of its own accord. A slow, deliberate blink when I was wide-eyed, a tilt of the head when mine was perfectly still. I recoiled, heart pounding, as the realization settled over me that I was no longer alone. In desperation, I sought answers in the old family records, dusty tomes kept in the attic that chronicled our family's history. Leafing through the pages, I discovered the mirror's origins, crafted centuries ago by a distant ancestor known for his eccentricities and rumored dabbling in the occult. The mirror, it seemed, was more than an heirloom. It was a portal, a thin veil between our world and the unknown. With this revelation came a renewed sense of urgency. My nights were plagued with vivid nightmares of being trapped in a world that mirrored my own, yet twisted and dark. I would wake in a cold sweat, the echo of my reflection's eyes haunting me, even in the comfort of my own room. The climax came one stormy night, rain lashing against the windows, the wind howling its lament through the eaves. I awoke with a start to find my room bathed in an otherworldly light. The mirror in the living room was glowing, its surface alive with a swirling energy that beckoned with a seductive pull. Compelled by an unseen force, I made my way downstairs, my feet moving of their own volition. Lily was already there, standing transfixed before the mirror, her expression serene yet vacant. Her reflection was different, a shadowy figure with eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. As I approached, I felt a tug, a magnetic force drawing me closer. I reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed the surface. The glass was cold, almost frigid, and as my hand made contact, I felt a spark, a surge of energy that coursed through my body. In that moment, everything changed. The reflection seemed to ripple, the glass melting away to reveal a landscape that was both familiar and foreign. It was our living room, yet the colors were muted, the shadows deeper. A world devoid of warmth and life. I stumbled back, breaking the connection, and the mirror snapped back to its usual self, the glow fading as quickly as it had come. Lily blinked, the vacant look gone, replaced by confusion and fear. We stood in silence, the enormity of what had happened sinking in. The days that followed were fraught with tension. We tried to speak to our parents, to explain the inexplicable, but they dismissed our concerns as childish fancy, a phase that would pass. The mirror remained, an ever-present reminder of the other world that lay just beyond our reach. Though the mirror's activity diminished, the sense of unease lingered. I'd never quite shake the feeling of being watched, of another presence lurking just beneath the surface. The nightmares continued, though less frequent, a reminder of the night the mirror revealed its true nature. Even now, years later, the mirror stands in the same spot in our living room, a silent sentinel to our family's history. I often catch myself staring into its depths, wondering if my reflection is truly my own. The fear has become a part of me, woven into the fabric of my existence, a reminder of the fragile boundary between our world and the unknown. The mirror remains a mystery, a portal to a realm I dared not explore further. It reflects the passage of time, the changes in our lives, yet it holds secrets that elude understanding. And though we live our lives around it, in the quiet moments, when the house is still and the shadows grow long, I sometimes hear the faint whisper of its secrets, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the glass. The sunlight filtered softly through the gauzy curtains, casting a gentle golden glow across the room. It felt almost like a sanctuary, the kind of place one might come to escape the chaos of the world outside. The walls were lined with bookshelves, overflowing with titles that promised peace, understanding, and the occasional self-help miracle. In the corner stood a potted plant, its leaves glossy and vibrant, a testament to care and attention. Dr. Lang, my therapist, sat across from me, her presence calm and reassuring, a steady beacon in the tumult of my mind. I had begun seeing Dr. Lang a few months ago, searching for clarity and guidance after a particularly challenging year. The sessions had become a refuge of sorts, a place where I could untangle the knots in my thoughts and feel the weight of my anxieties lift, if only temporarily. As I sat there, describing the week's events, I noticed something slightly out of place. A mirror leaned against the far wall. It was ornate, with an intricately carved wooden frame that seemed almost too grand for the room. I hadn't seen it before, though. Of course, I had been too absorbed in my own world to notice many things. The mirror caught my attention repeatedly, almost insistently. Dr. Lang, ever perceptive, noticed my distraction. "You keep looking over there," she observed gently. "Is something bothering you?" I hesitated, not wanting to appear fixated on something so trivial. "It's just that mirror. I don't remember it being there before. It's beautiful, just unexpected." Dr. Lang smiled, folding her hands in her lap. "Ah, yes. I recently added it. A family heirloom. I thought it might bring a bit of elegance to the room." I nodded, trying to focus back on our conversation, but my eyes kept drifting toward the mirror. There was something about it, something that seemed to beckon and repel at the same time. As we wrapped up the session, I found myself lingering by the door, stealing one last glance at the reflective surface before stepping into the hallway. The hallway was silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you, asking for secrets to come forth. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror, or perhaps something within it, was watching me. Over the next few sessions, I found myself increasingly preoccupied by the mirror. It was as though it had planted a seed of curiosity that grew with each visit. I began to notice small things, fleeting shadows, the way the room's light seemed to dim when I looked into it, the faint impression that my reflection was ever so slightly delayed. One evening, after a particularly taxing session, I sat in my car, hesitating before starting the engine. The image of the mirror lingered in my mind, its reflective surface swimming with possibilities and impossibilities. I shook my head, berating myself for letting an object consume so much of my thoughts. Yet, the feeling of unease persisted, gnawing subtly at the edges of my consciousness. It was during my next session that the first real disturbance occurred. As I spoke about a recurring dream, Dr. Lang listened intently, her expression ever compassionate. I glanced at the mirror, drawn inexplicably to it once more. This time, however, something felt different. My reflection stared back at me, as it should, but there was a moment, a flicker, where it seemed my reflection's eyes moved independently of mine. I blinked rapidly, trying to rationalize the anomaly as a trick of the light or my weary mind. Yet the unease settled deeper, embedding itself into the fabric of my thoughts. I managed to continue the session, though my concentration wavered, tethered reluctantly to the mirror. That night, sleep eluded me. My dreams, usually a respite, were filled with shifting shadows and echoing laughter, the kind that felt both familiar and foreign. I awoke feeling as though I had spent the night wandering through someone else's memory. The following day, curiosity overpowered caution. I arrived at Dr. Lang's office early, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mirror before our session began. The waiting area was quiet, the air thick with the scent of floral-scented diffuser sticks. I moved toward the door, peering inside the therapy room, where the mirror stood silently, its presence commanding and unsettling. I approached it cautiously, the polished surface reflecting the room behind me. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, as I leaned closer, I saw it. My reflection, its eyes widening in alarm, mouth moving silently as if trying to warn me. I stumbled back, my heart racing, the familiar room suddenly feeling like a stranger's domain. "What are you doing?" Dr. Lang's voice cut through my rising panic, grounding me back to reality. She stood in the doorway, her brow furrowed with concern. I'm sorry," I stammered, embarrassed by my trespass. "I just thought I saw something." Dr. Lang stepped closer, her gaze moving from me to the mirror. "It's only a mirror," she said, though her tone carried the faintest trace of doubt. I nodded, though doubt had seeped into my conviction, casting long shadows over what I knew to be reality. The sessions continued, each visit accentuating the strange connection between me and the mirror. It was as if the reflection had begun to develop its own identity, independent yet inextricably tied to mine. I would see it smirk when I was somber, frown when I felt light-hearted. These discrepancies, subtle yet undeniable, chipped away at my sense of self, leaving me questioning the boundaries between reality and illusion. I confided my fears to Dr. Lang, hoping for reassurance, a rational explanation to dismiss my growing paranoia, but her responses, usually so insightful, felt hollow, as if she too was trapped in the mirror's thrall. The climax arrived unexpectedly, a crescendo in the symphony of my unraveling mind. During one session, as I recounted a seemingly innocuous childhood memory, the mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water. My reflection, instead of mirroring my actions, reached out, its hand pressing against the glass as if trying to breach the divide. I felt a cold draft, an unnatural chill that seeped into my bones. Panic surged through me, an instinctual response to the uncanny. I backed away, nearly colliding with the bookshelf. Dr. Lang stood, her expression shifting from professional composure to genuine alarm. The mirror's hold on the room seemed to tighten, the air charged with an electric tension. In a desperate attempt, I lunged forward, intending to shatter the glass, to break free from the grip of whatever lay beyond. But my hand met resistance, a barrier that sent a shock of cold through my arm. My reflection smiled, a cold, knowing smile, before retreating, leaving me facing my own wide-eyed terror. Dr. Lang moved swiftly, pulling me back from the mirror's reach, her voice a calming mantra that slowly dissolved the fog of fear. We sat in silence for a moment, the room settling back into its prior stillness, though the air still hummed with residual disquiet. "I think we need to move the mirror," Dr. Lang finally said, her voice steady but firm. I nodded, unable to articulate the kaleidoscope of emotions within me. As we dismantled the mirror's place in the room, a palpable sense of relief washed over me, though an undercurrent of unease lingered, a reminder of the unknown that lay just beyond the surface of glass. The mirror was removed the next day, taken to a storage room in the building's basement. I resumed my sessions with Dr. Lang, gradually reclaiming a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the memory of the reflection that wasn't quite me haunted my thoughts, a lingering specter in moments of solitude. Occasionally, I would catch my reflection in other mirrors, half expecting it to move independently to reveal its secrets. But each time, it mirrored my actions faithfully, a reliable echo of my existence. Still, the fear lingered, a shadow that stretched long in the quiet moments, whispering of realities unseen, of dimensions that intertwined with ours in cruel, unfathomable ways. Dr. Lang and I spoke often of the experience, dissecting it from psychological perspectives. exploring the boundaries of perception and reality. Her insights were comforting, yet the memory of that reflection persisted. A chilling reminder of the otherworldly lurking just beyond the edge of understanding. In the end, I realized that the mirror had not simply reflected my image, but had mirrored something deeper, an aspect of myself that lay hidden beneath layers of consciousness. It had shown me the fragility of my own perception, the thin veil separating the known from the unknown. Though life returned to its usual rhythm, a part of me remained vigilant, ever aware of the reflections that surrounded me, the unseen possibilities that danced just beyond the realm of sight. The mirror's absence was a relief. Yet it was also a reminder, a token of the hidden truths that lurk within the mundane, waiting patiently for the unsuspecting gaze to unlock their mysteries.
In Fargo, North Dakota, the days bleed into each other with a quiet monotony that I had grown accustomed to over the years. The town was small, its people familiar. I ran a small antique shop on a corner of Main Street, a relic of the past in its own right. My clientele was a mix of local collectors and curious tourists, each seeking a piece of history to carry back into their lives. The shop, with its creaky wooden floors and shelves overflowing with trinkets and treasures, was as much a part of me as my own skin. Each item had a story, a whisper of a life long gone, and I had dedicated myself to preserving these echoes of time. It was a regular weekday when the mirror arrived. The delivery truck pulled up outside the shop, and I remember the driver, a burly man with a sun-worn face, commenting on how unusually heavy it was for its size. The mirror was encased in an ornate golden frame, tarnished with age, but still possessing an undeniable elegance. Its glass was clouded, as though secrets had been breathed upon its surface and left to linger. Yet, there was something about it that drew me in, like a moth to a flame. It seemed to hum with a presence, an undercurrent of something that I couldn't quite place. I set it up in the back of the shop, where the light was soft and forgiving, a perfect place for it to rest among its fellow relics. Its arrival did not incite any particular excitement. Mirrors were a staple among antiques, after all. Yet, as the days passed, I found myself drawn to it repeatedly, compelled by an inexplicable need to stand before it. Each time, I would look into its depths, expecting to see my reflection. But instead, there was a sensation of looking into something else entirely. The first night it happened, I had stayed late in the shop, poring over inventory records. I rose to stretch, my eyes naturally falling on the mirror. The shop was quiet, the only sound the ticking of an old grandfather clock. As I stood before the mirror, a chill crept up my spine. My reflection was there, but it was altered. The room behind me was not the shop. It was a vast, shadowy space, its boundaries lost to darkness. I blinked, and my reflection blinked back, now displaying the mundane backdrop of my shop. Dismissing it as fatigue, I locked up and went home, determined to get a good night's sleep. The next day, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The shop was bustling, and I was kept busy with customers and phone calls, but my mind drifted back to the mirror. When evening came, I stood before it again, this time more deliberately. A different scene unfolded behind my reflection. A dense forest, its trees gnarled and twisted, their branches clawing at an overcast sky. The air in the shop felt suddenly heavy, the shadows deeper. It was as though the mirror was a window into another world, a place that felt both foreign and eerily familiar. Curiosity burned within me, mingled with a growing apprehension. What was this mirror? What had I unwittingly brought into my shop? I scoured through old catalogs, notes from auctions and estate sales, trying to trace its origin. There was no record, no mention of its provenance. It was as though it had appeared from nowhere, a phantom among the relics. Days turned into weeks, and the visions persisted, each more vivid and unsettling than the last. I saw abandoned cities, their architecture alien yet hauntingly beautiful. Oceans of mist where shapes moved beneath the surface, and deserts where the sand whispered secrets on the wind. I became obsessed, spending hours in front of the mirror, trying to decipher its mysteries. My business suffered. Customers turned away by my distracted demeanor, but I could not pull myself away. One evening, as I stood before the mirror, the scene shifted once more. This time, it was a room, a dimly lit chamber filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Each surface shimmered, reflecting the room back upon itself endlessly. In the center stood a figure, cloaked in shadow, its features obscured. It raised a hand, and I felt an invisible force pulling me forward, as though the glass between us was thinning, becoming permeable. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The sensation was gone, the mirror once again reflecting my shop. But the fear remained. The figure in the mirror, the keeper, as I came to call it, had looked into me, and for a brief moment I felt its awareness, its intent. This was not a simple object. It was a doorway, a bridge to another realm, and I was teetering on the edge of crossing over. Haunted by this revelation, I resolved to rid myself of the mirror. I called experts, auction houses, anyone who might take it off my hands, but each time, obstacles arose. Shipments were lost, deals fell through, and the mirror remained, stubbornly anchored to my life. The longer it stayed, the more I felt its influence creeping into my thoughts, my dreams. I would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, visions of the keeper's world vivid in my mind. The boundary between reality and reflection blurred, and I began to question my own sanity. Was this a curse, or had I merely discovered a truth too vast for my comprehension? In desperation, I reached out to a local historian, a woman named Evelyn who specialized in folklore and occult artifacts. She came to the shop, her eyes lighting up with a mix of awe and concern as she examined the mirror. "This is a scrying glass," she murmured, tracing a finger along the frame's intricate carvings. "A portal, but not one you should enter lightly." We spoke for hours, Evelyn sharing tales of mirrors used in rituals, of worlds within worlds, and of those who had become lost, unable to find their way back. Her knowledge was vast, and yet she could offer no solution, only caution. "The keeper," she said, "is a guardian of the threshold. If it has shown itself to you, there is a purpose." As she left, her words echoed in my mind. I felt a profound sense of dread, but also a strange compulsion to understand what lay beyond. The mirror was not merely an object. It was an invitation to a journey I had not asked for, but could not refuse. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay awake, the darkness of my room a poor substitute for the shadowy realms I had glimpsed. By morning, I was resolved. I needed to confront the keeper, to understand its purpose, and perhaps find a way to sever its grip on my life. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the shop, I stood once more before the mirror. The room around me seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out, my fingers brushing the cool glass. The surface rippled like water, and a thrill of fear raced through me. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The sensation was like stepping into a pool of ink. For a moment, the world was dark, my senses overwhelmed by the cold that seeped into my bones. Then, slowly, the darkness lifted, giving way to the chamber I had seen before, the room of mirrors. The keeper stood before me, its presence palpable, the air humming with its energy. It regarded me silently, and I felt its mind touch mine, a whisper of thoughts and emotions not entirely my own. I understood then that the mirror was not merely a portal, but a conduit for understanding, for connection between worlds. This realm was vast and strange, a myriad of dimensions layered upon each other, each accessible through the mirrors that lined the chamber's walls. I saw glimpses of other lives, other realities, each a thread in the tapestry of existence. And in the center of it all stood the Keeper, its purpose to guard and guide those who dared to step beyond the veil. But as I stood there, surrounded by infinity, a realization dawned. I had crossed a boundary that was not meant to be crossed, had gazed upon truths that were not mine to hold. The Keeper had shown me the vastness of the universe, the delicate balance of worlds, and with it, the burden of such knowledge. I felt a gentle push, a nudge from the Keeper, urging me back to where I belonged. With a reluctant heart, I turned away from the kaleidoscope of realities and stepped back through the mirror. The shop was as I had left it, yet everything felt altered, infused with a new perspective. The mirror stood silent, its surface once again reflecting only my own world. The Keeper had released me, but the experience had left an indelible mark on my soul. In the days that followed, I found a new sense of peace, tempered by a lingering awareness of the unseen universe that surrounded us all. The mirror, ever present, remained a sentinel in the shop, a reminder of the journey I had taken and the knowledge I had glimpsed. And though the Keeper no longer beckoned, its presence was a constant whisperer in the back of my mind, a reminder of the worlds beyond reflection, and of the infinite mysteries that awaited those who dared to see.